In this video, I thought I would yap a little bit about the Bel Air, a little bit of its past, why I always liked the 59 Chevys. And I've spoke about all this in past videos, but I got new subscribers and I've never really talked about it all in one video. It's just snippets here and there and videos throughout the years. So like I say, this video is mostly going to be on the Bel Air. So the reason why, I'll sit down here for a moment. The reason why I always liked 59 Chevys, when I was a little kid, my dad had a 59 Chevy Parkwood station wagon. And as a kid, you know, most kids like rockets and retro-y things like, you know, jets and rockets, planes, whatnot. And especially in that era, you know, it was the age of the Apollo rockets in the 60s and whatnot. And so anyway, yeah, I like the fins and the crazy styling of the car. And my dad traded it in, that Parkwood, and I'll put a photo of the Parkwood. I think I have a photo on my laptop, so I'll put a photo in it right about here of the Parkwood. And then he traded that Parkwood in for a 66 Ford Country sedan. I'll put a photo of that in the video here too. And I felt like, you know, the Ford just wasn't the wild car like the Chevy was. I just really liked that 59 Parkwood, and I always swore after the fact, after he traded it in one day, that I'm going to have my own 59 Chevy. And when we were in auto shop class in high school, maybe my junior year, we're all sitting around in the shop. It was a 2-hour class, and we had, so there was a break between, you know, the 2 hours of the class, and we'd sit around and talk in the shop instead of, you know, why go out in the hall and stir trouble. So we just sat around and talked, and we were talking about cars that we wanted. Most of them wanted Trans Ams, you know, the like Smokey and the Band that was out in, I don't know, the mid to late 70s there. They wanted Trans Ams and Z28s and Corvettes and, you know, cars like that, the muscle cars, the Road Runners. Anyway, I was sitting there and they said, well, what kind of car do you want? And I said, a 59 Chevy, and they laughed. They literally laughed at me. And they're like, why the heck would you want something like that? You know, just a big old stodgy car with, you know, ugly car like that. And I told them, well, I said, I like the fins and the styling. I just think it's kind of wild. I want one. And one of my friends in the group there chimed in. There's about 6 or 8 of us sitting there. And he stated his dad just inherited his father's 59 Chevy. His grandfather had passed away. And I asked him, I says, well, what's he going to do with it? And he said he doesn't know. And anyway, he came back to school the next day and told me he'd sell it for $150. So I said I wanted to come and look at it. And now they had got the car running and driving. It was a drivable car when I bought it. It had sat for 11 years in his garage at his house, and the original owner. And you know, apparently he got sick and couldn't drive, and then, you know, it lingered on, and then he passed away and they inherited the car. Well, the one son, like I say, got the car running and drove it just a little bit. The one that I was in school with drove it in once, I think, to change oil or something in the auto shop class, and I was like, yeah, I want to buy it. So the car had 58,000 miles on it. I drove over to their house to look at it. He wanted $150 for it. Now I'm going to go over the condition of the car, walk around. So the headlight, and sorry it's masked off because I'm redoing the grill screen moldings, and you'll see them in my videos. But one of the headlights was hanging out, the high beam on this side. The car was rusted out on the top of the front fenders here a little bit. It was rusted out just here a little bit on both sides. The front valance panels were basically completely gone from about here to here. This was just one big hole. The top part and the edges were there, so I was able to use it as a pattern to make these out of fiberglass. We put a mold release on the sheet metal. The car had a good sized dent in the door right here. It was scraped right in here. I'm not looking at the screen so you can see where I'm pointing, but it was scraped right here, had a dent right here, and this whole quarter panel from about here to here above the trim was smashed in. And I think, you know, those old garages had those big hinges with the doors that swung up and down. I think they caught that hinge pulling the car in the garage, and this was severely smashed. I mean severely, from there to there. The trim was damaged a little bit, but pretty much all from the molding down was free of damage. No rust. The rear valances were all smashed and rotted, but I straightened them out and made them out of fiberglass, sandwiching what was left of the metal between the fiberglass. This side over here had a big dent in it right here, and the molding is still kind of, I straightened the molding up the best I could, but I since have parts cars. I have both sides complete molding, both sides of the car, so if I ever redo anything, I'll just put the molding. It's perfect, the parts car molding that I got. I just got to paint the white insert in them yet. I repainted the white inserts in these ones too. But anyway, I had a good sized dent right here, a couple other minor dents over in here. The rest of the car was pretty dent free, pretty rust free. Now Frank Sr., the guy I purchased the car from, explained that it had been smashed in this corner. He said his father was turning right. This is what he told me. And behind the car ahead of him that was turning right, and the car ahead of him stopped suddenly, and he ran into the back of that car with this front corner of this. So that was when the car was brand new. He said it was the first, before it was even a year old, he'd smashed this. And you can see where they replaced the fender and the hood and the bumper half, and I think the headlight assembly. But I don't know if this was replaced or not, or if it was straightened. I just don't know. I'm assuming they replaced this. I imagine it damaged because you can see where the inner fender was straightened. You can see where the radiator core support was straightened. And some of it down in there doesn't meet up exactly because they didn't totally straighten it out. The body shop kind of did a, you know, fix it, make it look good, and get it back out on the road type of job. They didn't do a, oh, let's make it like factory original again. They didn't do that. They just, you know, that's what body shops do. They make them to where they look presentable and ship them. And that's what they did. So over the years, I've been fixing a few little odds and ends here on the car. And but anyway, that was kind of the extent of the damage. It had clear glass. Like I say, I put easy eye glass from a 60 Impala four-door sedan that was loaded. The friend that bought the car for parts, it was for sale at the end of this guy's driveway, the 60 Impala, and a guy driving drunk in a Ford Tempo T-boned it in the passenger side right at the doors and pushed the doors to almost the transmission tunnel. None of the glass was broken in the car, which was, I found, flabbergasting. The seat was bent like this, the front seat. The back seat was popped out and bent up a bit too. But yeah, the car was just demolished. And so I got the glass, and I don't know, there's a few other parts. He wanted the trunk lid, and he wanted some of the trunk pans and stuff like that for his convertible that he was restoring, and he needed a drivetrain. And it wasn't a Power Glide, it was a Turbo Glide. It was a 348 four-barrel Turbo Glide, and it had power steering, power brakes, and factory air conditioning. And he wanted all that for his convertible, and it had power windows, but the driver's side, or the passenger side, I'm sorry, the passenger side window motors were broken from when they were smashed. The doors were smashed. Didn't break the glass. I got the glass out of the car. The glass is in this car. That's the glass out of that 60 Impala four-door sedan. I had to change the weather stripping because it was cracked, and the back glass started leaking a little bit. So I thought, well, I'll just replace the weather stripping. Well, if I'm taking the glass out and putting it back in, I figured, why not put that easy eye glass in? I had it, So it was in my folks' basement. You know, I was 17 when I bought that Bel Air. So anyway, I put the Easy Eye glass in probably in the early 80s, 81, 82, maybe 83, I'm guessing. And but when I bought the car too, mechanically it ran and drove, but it needed a new exhaust system. The exhaust system was all rotted out. The brakes were metal to metal, and the pedal would almost go to the floor, but it would stop. And, you know, so it needed tires, you know, typical, no battery. I had to buy a battery for it. And, you know, it was typical. I mean, it was a 19-year-old car when I bought it, 1978. I bought it March 12th, 1978. It was my first car. Drove it through high school. But anyway, I put brakes on it. Had to do the brakes, exhaust, tires, you know, the usual stuff. And took it into the auto shop class and did an alignment, and couldn't get the alignment exactly, you know, the way it should be. And that was when I realized that the frame was bent from that accident and never really been straightened. And so I drove it for years like that. It tracked down the road nice and straight. It just caused a little tire wear on that front tire. The tire was like this, just ever so slightly. You could very vaguely see it. And so it was some years later, I had a friend that worked in a body shop. They had a frame rack, and we threw it on the frame rack and pulled the frame out, and now it can be aligned correctly. You know, I'm like I say, I'm just gonna, this is 59 Chevy stories that I'm telling, and I earned the money the $75 to purchase the car. And, you know, $75 was a bit more money than what it is nowadays. You know, 75 bucks won't even fill your car up with gas now. And I was putting that in this last summer to go cruising per tank, you know, when premium was $7 a gallon. Yeah, that 348 needs premium gas. So that bites, but that's just the way it is. And so it's been a good car. I have no complaints. I've had 58,000 miles when I purchased it. It just turned 200,000 this past summer. I had to rebuild the gearbox, put a new synchro. The 2-3 synchro clutch had gone bad. It was hard to get it in the second. It was the point where I'd have to scream the engine in first and go right to third because it would just get gear clash trying to get in the second. It was not a usable gear anymore. So that's just before I started making lots of videos. I pulled the gearbox and put a new synchro clutch in it. And I was telling my dad about it, and I put a new clutch and all that stuff in it at the same time, seeing the gearbox was out. Clutch worked fine, but, you know, I had the gearbox out. Why not? And I sent the drive shaft out and had it balanced and put new U-joints and center bearing in it and whatnot. So all good. Well, my dad was that's when he got me the GoPro. He wanted to see what my goings-ons were, my doings. So he bought me the GoPro so I could email him video of what I'm doing, and the files were too big to email. So I started putting them on YouTube for him, and that's how my YouTube channel got started, was because of this car and working on it, and my dad wanting to see what the heck I was doing. With this car being my driver, this is always my fallback cruiser. I buy all these cars and fix them up and drive them a summer or so and then resell them. And this car just sits around and collects dust, although I would still drive it. Like when I had the Pontiac, I was still driving this. Same with when I had the Galaxy. I enjoy driving. It's a fun car to drive. So I do, you know, it's been my summer cruiser, and I'm not going to restore this car. I repainted it in 1982, and if I find a photo of me painting the quarters, a lot of the photos of this car are packed away. Excuse me. I have moved a couple of times, and I packed them up in the moves, and I haven't located them since I moved here, the photos when I purchased this car. When I find them, I'll put them up. But I have a photo of me painting the rear quarter in my dad's backyard under a shade tree. I'll put a photo or two of that in. And how I did the car, when I bought it, it was all the original paint, 100%. Well, other than where the body shop had repainted the fender and the hood and this and the thing there and whatnot. But the way I repainted it, and when I first bought it, I fixed some dents, you know, and a friend of mine's dad owned a plumbing and heating company, and he had acetylene torches, so I brazed sheet metal in where it was rusted out, and I bumped this quarter panel out. Now I was 17 years old, and bumped this out, and painted it up with lacquer, you know, and just kind of paint it. That way I could paint it here and there where I needed to. You can spot lacquer in pretty easily, even with black. And black is a difficult color to spot in. But anyway, I painted when I repainted the car in acrylic enamel, because I was having problems with the black cracking like it did on those valance panels. This started spider webbing where I had repaired and I had repainted this quarter panel and this door, and the lacquer was cracking. So I wanted to repaint the car, and the lacquer was cracking up here where I painted up here and stuff. You know, everywhere where there was lacquer repaint, the hood and the fender where the factory or the dealership the body shop had repainted in lacquer was cracking. And you can't repaint over cracked paint. You got to strip it to the metal. So I stripped the front clip, took all the trim, moldings, bumpers, wipers, took this panel out, the windshield trim off, everything. But I couldn't get these off, so I left them on and masked them off, and I masked off that hood latch thing. And I stripped the body to the metal and sanded it all out and primed and painted it in acrylic enamel. And then the front clip looked fantastic. Then I had the doors that kind of looked bad, and the rear and the roof. So little by little, I took the doors off the car, and I painted the jambs and the inside jambs of the doors in one shoot, and I repainted this gray around the frames here. And then on a second shoot, I painted the outer sides of the doors. And I'll put a picture in, and you'll see this is still black. After I repainted the doors, it was in the fall, and I wanted to do it after the bugs were done. And so I wouldn't get bugs on the paint, because I did all this outdoors in my dad's backyard, the whole car. And so this was still black. I hadn't painted the white on here yet, and you'll notice that in the photo. I'll try and find one and put it here. And then after I got the doors painted, the following, I think that would have been 82. So this might have been 81. This would have been 82. I stripped the trim and the bumpers and the molding and everything off, and repainted the quarter panels and fins and trunk lid and stuff that summer with acrylic enamel. And that's where you'll see that picture of me painting this back part of the car. So I painted it in 3 different shoots. So I did the white in one shoot, I did the quarters in one shoot, the door jambs and the door jambs in one shoot, the outer skins of doors in another, and the front clip in a shoot. And I painted the underside of the hood here. And there was a little rust up in here that I knocked out, you can see. But it hadn't rusted through this side, so I just kind of, I didn't want, it would have caused more damage to repair that than what it was worth. So, you know, it would have warped things, or there was no point in doing anything with it. I didn't want to stuff body filler in there that would hold moisture against the outer skin and rot it. I just sprayed white lithium grease, WD-40 white lithium grease all up in there, and some motor oil, and that's been like that since 1978, and it hasn't come through there. So that's why I don't worry about that. I did have to replace the heater core and the hot water valve sometime in the 80s, and I replaced the radiator sometime in the 80s. You know, I added the power steering and power brakes. The car was manual steering, manual brakes. I got them off parts cars. The parts cars are another story in itself. I've had one of them was a 59 Impala sports sedan. It was a gold one, and it was had a little car dealership in Romeo. It was an AMC dealer in the later years, but it had 64 tags on it, so it wasn't on the road very long. It had 283 Power Glide. I stripped that car when Jeff, my friend, his dad owned the place, and he said they were clearing out that lot where the 59 was sunk into the ground. It was like a junkyard next to the building, and they were clearing it out because they're selling it to the Village of Romeo to use as a parking lot. And that Impala sports sedan was right in the middle of where they wanted to clear out. And Jeff asked, he says, "Do you want that 59 Impala?" Well, the car would have fell apart and disintegrated trying to move it. It had sat there sunk into the ground since '64, and this was probably, you know, late '80s. It was pretty rotten. So I went and looked at it, and there was no way we could get it out of there in one piece. So I just stripped it clean where it sat of anything good. I got every piece of trim off that car, the dash. If it was good, I took it off, and over the years sold most of it and used it, some of it, and gave some of it away. But Jeff took the engine out of that car and took it apart. It was sitting with the hood up. The air cleaner was in the valve covers are in the back seat, which I took. And actually the valve covers are on this engine, and the air cleaner's up in the garage because it'll fit that 283 engine that I have there. I've shown that engine in past videos. The pistons were just corroded into the cylinders so bad he had to take a hammer and bust them out. And he was going to see if he could rebuild the engine, but all 8 cylinders would have had to been re-sleeved, so it just wasn't worth it to him. So that just became scrap metal. But you know, and then the 60 Impala or 60 Bel Air 2-door that I needed a diff carrier out of for another project. The old guy that had it, he was in his late 80s. He had an old farm outside of Romeo, and he had dozens of cars around there. He had probably a half a dozen 59s, half dozen 60s, and I'd go there, and he would just like the company, so he would talk my ear off every time I'd go over there. He would give me whatever I wanted and wouldn't take any money for it. If I gave him money, he'd be like, "Oh, I'll donate it to the church." And he was just happy to have somebody come around and talk to him, so I used to just go there even if I didn't need stuff and visit him. And one day I needed this differential carrier, and there was a 60 Bel Air sedan, 2-door sedan, and it was a 235 Power Glide, so I figured it has the 336 gear, which is what I was looking for. And I needed to, it was so grown in these trees, I needed to drag it out of there to get the diff out. So my dad was with me, and I was talking to old Joe, and I said, I asked him if he had something I could lift the car with. He says, "Oh, there's a tractor, front end loader tractor over there." And the weeds were so tall I couldn't even see it. It was a big tractor, yeah, big diesel Massey Ferguson. And then when I saw it through the weeds, I thought, "Oh, that thing's never going to start. It doesn't look like it's been moved in 30 years. He says, "I'll go in the house and get the keys." And he went in the house and came out with the keys, and I went out there and pulled the fuel valve and put the key in, turned it on, pushed the starter button. That thing lit right up. I was blown away. So yeah, we drove it over and put a chain around the differential. And actually at first we put the chain around the rear frame rails, and then I pulled it, started backing up with the tractor, and we pulled the rear quarter panels and rear frame right out from under the car, and there was the axle, and the car was broken in two, rusted out so bad. So we hooked the chain to the diff, and I just lifted it out from under the car. It ripped the control arms out from their mountings. It was so rotted out. Even the diff housing was rotted out. The gear lube had leaked out. So I had to take the carrier out, which I had to cut the drums off, to get the axles out, and it took a couple hours to get it down to where I could get the carrier out, and then I had to put all new bearings in it because they were seized up from, just the years of sitting there. But that was a nice guy, old Joe was. I know I'm rambling on here. That's just what I'm going to do. He was such a nice guy, and I was there, and I found out his well didn't work. And for all the components he gave me, I told him I'll look at it and see if I can see what's wrong with it, and determined that the well pump was bad, and I was able to get a hold of a local well driller that actually came out and replaced his pump free of charge, did it for him out of the kindness of their hearts. And so he was so grateful to have water at his farm again. It was a big farm that, he rented the land out now. He didn't farm, but there was probably 20 tractors around there. Most of them, there's John Deere A's, there's co-ops, and he offered to get, he didn't have it to John Deere A. What do I do with them? I didn't have any place for them. They eventually, when he passed away, a company came in and had an auction and auctioned everything off. But yeah, it was kind of fun getting parts from old Joe there. I kind of missed going over there, and talking with him and just visiting. He was a wealth of information, nothing like listening to some, person in their 80s or 90s, talk about back in the day with these cars, and it was just, he was an interesting guy. Like I say, I enjoyed talking to him. He worked a lot on diesels. He was very good with diesels. He had a Olds diesel that he drove as his car, Olds Delta 88 diesel. And but anyway, getting back to the Bel Air here. Before the video gets too long, I'll try not and yap too much longer. It's already probably getting close to half an hour. But anyway, the interior on this car was all original when I purchased it. And I have a photo of me sitting in the car when I was a kid, or when I was 17 when I bought the car. And you'll notice this door panel was a Biscayne door panel. If I find the photo, I'll put it in here. But this guy said he'd redo the interior for $1,000, and I was like, okay. And I had this trim. This was in the 80s too, and I had this stainless steel trim that I got off other cars, put on. It actually went, and then I had another straight piece go across the bottom, so there would have been 2 pieces there and 2 pieces back here. So there's 8 pieces of trim all total, and he sold them to somebody else. He did a car for him, put them on their car, and told me that I never gave them to him. And then, he didn't do I showed the vinyl, from the here to here is shorter there than what it is here. And other than that, I thought, if you'd put that trim on and did the vinyl right, I would have been happy. And if you put new foam in the seats, I would have been happy too. So this seat's coming out this year, and I'm going to repad underneath it and then just put the seat cover back on. There's nothing wrong with the seat cover. And the dash is still the original paint. It's all 100% original. AM radio is a dealer installed accessory. It's an RCA. The clock was dealer installed. The vent shades were dealer installed. The rocker panels were installed by me. The moldings, I should say, and the door edge guards were installed by me. And it had dog dish hubcaps on it originally when I bought the car, and I put the full wheel covers on it. But anyway, let me a lot of stuff in the glove box here. Let me show you a couple things on it. I purchased this at a flea market, and it's got some interesting stuff in here that were not in the shop manuals. This was like a supplement to the shop manual, these service bulletins, and it shows things that were changed during the production year that was done after the shop manual was printed. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in here, and it covers all our vehicles from cars to heavy duty trucks. And it shows servicing the brakes, different things that, for different things. But this is what you can see what the drivetrains were that were offered in 1959. And so you can see the 6-cylinder single barrel was 135 horsepower with an 8.25 compression ratio with 217 foot-pounds of torque at 2400 RPM. And it tells you the gear ratios, which is helpful if you're looking for a specific gear ratio and you know what the drivetrain is in the car, then you can figure pretty commonly what the gear ratio is. And a friend of mine, his dad had a 283 fuel injected Power Glide, so his would have been a 336. He had an Impala, 59 Impala, an early one. Fuel injection was offered into early 59, and you could get it with two different horsepower ratings, 250 or 290, depending if you had the hydraulic or solid cam and the two compression ratios. And but you couldn't get air conditioning or air suspension with the fuel injection option. This is this car, 348, 3-speed, 336. So it says it's 250 horsepower, 9.5 to 1 compression ratio. I was thinking it was 10.5, but it's 9.5. 355 foot-pounds of torque at 2,800 in the bore and stroke. The triple 2-barrel was 280. The 4-barrel special cam, which was a solid lift cam, was 300, and the tri-power special solid lift cam was 315. So those are the horsepower ranges of the 348. The 283 came in a 185, a 230, a 250, and a 290 horse. And the truck engines, if you have a truck and you want to know what's what with the truck engines. But it's just kind of interesting when you have this. So whenever I see stuff like this, you know, I jump on it, because you never know, and you might need that information that's in one of these that's not in the shop manual. And the color combinations for the car, I should take this out in the light so you can get a better view. This shows all lubrication points for these cars, whether you have a 6 or an 8, and the chassis. This was distributed by Esso, not GM, but it basically gives you all their, get that opened up yet, and it tells you the timing and, you know, all the pertinent information that you need to know. So this would have gone out to the Esso. Probably their service guys could look at this to know what to do on a customer's cars. So there is a little other feature thing. There's the alignment specs for this car. So if you need to do an alignment on your car and you want to know what the alignment is, specs for your 59 Chevy, pause your video and screenshot your screen and print it out. It gives you all the information you need to know on your alignment. Here's the color palette. If you're interested in the colors and what they call them, and the two-tone combinations. Just if you're interested, I just don't, yeah, it doesn't say anything on the back. This is strictly a page out of the, it's out of one of my paint books I have, actually. I have tons of paint books with all the chips. Probably go back to the early 50s, I'm guessing. This was put on the steering wheel of power steering cars. And it's just kind of neat. You can pause if you want to read it, and I'll turn the wheel to the different things. And they'd hang this from the mirror, the steering wheel horn ring or something, you know, just to show. So when you're on the dealer lot, you could glance in the car on the lot until it had power steering, because that would be hanging from the horn ring or the rear view mirror. That's the other side of it. I just thought that was kind of neat. I was at a flea market or somewhere when parts, you know, a car parts flea market, a swap meet, and I saw that and I had to have it. And then this, I've had this, a friend of mine gave it to me. I've had this for a long time. They're stunning. That would be a 348 in there. You can tell from the V and cross flags. It's in cameo coral and satin beige. They usually had gray interiors in that color combination. I have a friend that has one of these in those colors that's like brand new. I don't even think the car has 30,000 miles on it. Impala four-door sedan, Impala convertible. I'll just go through here page by page and give you a glance. This is what you would have got at the dealership, the brochure, if you're looking for a new 59 Chevy. These are the Bel Airs. The Bel Air came in a four-door sports sedan, four-door sedan. This car, two-door sedan. Biscayne two-door sedan. This car actually came in a sport coupe also. The Bel Air was offered in a sport coupe. There's the Parkwood. That's a Kingswood there. 9-passenger was the Kingswood, and the 6-passenger was the Parkwood. And the Kingswoods are kind of rare. You don't see a lot of them around. That's the Nomad. A Brookwood. You can see their upholstery in the Impala or Nomad. That's a Nomad interior. Kingswood, Parkwood interior, which was a little different. The upholstery fabric was different in the wagons than the sedans. Brookwood interior. And the different wagon bodies. Parkwood 6-passenger, Brookwood 6-passenger. Both 4-doors, that's a 2-door. 2-door was only available in a Brookwood. I think it'd be fun to take a 2-door Brookwood and put all the Nomad stuff on it. There we go. That's not your phone, that's mine. The Impala dash, the Impala had trim down here, and it would have had vents there and down here if it had AC. Biscayne interior. Bel Air interior. There you can kind of see the door panels and seats like what I talk about in the past videos. Colors that were offered. Fisher body. There's the Bel Air seat again. Talking about how streamlined the car is. The greater visibility with those huge pieces of glass. Single key lock system, foot brake parking. Just kind of some of the features. Functional horsepower. So you can read this if you want. You can pause it if need be. And then they're talking about the new Turbo Glide. I had a 60 Bel Air with a Turbo Glide transmission in it. Safety Master brakes. Level air suspension, which had a high failure rate, so a lot of people swapped them back to coil. There's the chassis and the dual exhaust. There's the resonators that this had, and they kept rotting out. You can see how the tailpipes, see how the tailpipe comes in there? That's the way they're correctly routed. I was talking about that when I was doing the valance panels, and the way it would dump out would be in the corner of the valance. Anyway, there we go. And if you can read that, more power to you. I'll do it just in case if you can. And there we go. I'll wrap this video up here in a moment, but I basically was able to pay for this and needed a car while I was in high school. I was in the co-op program, so I went to school for 4 classes, and at noon I left school and went to work. And I worked for Romeo Community Schools as a mechanic at their school bus garage. I did tune-ups and oil changes and brakes, and I didn't do tires. They had a guy that come in and broke the tires down. They were split rims, and they were kind of dangerous. They put them in a steel cage that was bulged out from when they would explode, and they were loud when they would explode, but I only saw one explode, and it was deafening. And so yeah, they're kind of dangerous. But you know, I just did like fix burned out lights and you know, just maintenance stuff, tune-ups. They're all 361s. They're Ford B700 and B750 chassis. They all had different bodies, Carpenter, you know, Superior. There's, you name it, the body manufacturers all the body manufacturers put their bodies on Ford chassis. They were all 5 speeds with power steering and air brakes. And the 60 passenger buses had 2 barrels, and the 66 passengers had 4 barrels. They're all Holley carburetors, and they were governed. And you could play with the governor and adjust them so the buses would go fast. Like I had one driver, she complained when she went on field trips that she couldn't keep up with traffic on the freeway, so we had to adjust the governor a little bit to give it a little bit more speed. But that's how I earned my money in high school, and why I drove this car back and forth to school, so I could drive from school to work and home and whatnot. And it was kind of nice, and it was nice with my first car, and drove it through high school. But anyway, that, you know, my $75 58,000 mile car that now has 200,000 miles. How many of you bought a car for $75 and rolled the odometer twice on it? Yeah, I turned the odometer around on it twice. And I'll talk about the rolling it the first time. You saw it the second time. I did a video on it. The first time, I'll just talk about it right now. This video is already a half an hour long. Might as well yap a little bit more about it. So my dad and I went to turn it. I lived in Romeo at the time. We went to turn it 100,000 miles. And it was the early 80s, and we were going down 32-mile road, just leaving the village limits of Romeo, when it turned 100,000 miles, starting down this hill. Kind of went down into a little valley, a little dip, and then it went back up, and then you came to Mound Road. And there was probably maybe 6-8 cars ahead of us, and maybe the 3rd or 4th car ahead of us was kind of in one of those herky-jerky yanks. And all of a sudden, and we're on a double yellow heading down this hill into this little gully or valley, and that it was this car, I'll tell you what kind of car it was in a minute, but this car pulled out to pass, and it was passing 2 or 3 cars, and they had it flat out on the floor. It was like, you know, blowing crud out the tailpipes and really moving. And he was coming down to the bottom of the hill, and there was some oncoming cars that had just topped the hill, and so he went to cut back over into the right lane. And as he hit that dip at the bottom of the hill, the car went airborne as he was cutting the wheel to go back to the right lane, and the car flew through the air and wrapped around a tree and broke the car in two. Both the front and rear of the car was facing the same direction. The car was literally broken in two right at the center of the car. And so we pulled over. My dad thought it was my brother at first. He was panic stricken because the car kind of looked like my brother's. He had a red Plymouth Valiant, 76 Valiant at the time. And you know, and when you're that far back, you know, a lot of the cars, like today, they all look kind of familiar then to, you know, similar in their ways. Cars have always had those similar appearances forever, it seems, except, you know, in this era when you could obviously tell what was what. But anyway, we got to the bottom of the hill and stopped, and it was pretty gruesome. The blood was running down the hood like a river, flowing off the end, and my dad was panicking, thinking it was my brother. I told him it's not Kevin's car, it's a Ford Torino. And it was a 72 Ford Torino. but it was the most gruesome thing I ever seen in my life. They thought his girlfriend was still in the car. He was a like 16 or 17-year-old kid. They thought his girlfriend was in the car, so he started searching the woods there to see if the body was thrown out into the woods. Well, turns out the girlfriend was still at the Dairy Queen. They were at the Dairy Queen, and they got into a squabble, and he stormed off, and that's why he was driving like a maniac. And it ended up ending his life. It really wasn't worth it, you know, for the... What were they squabbling over? Probably nothing. Probably nobody'd even remember now. But anyway, yeah, that was a sad situation. The tree's still there. The tree still has a scar in it. Next time I'm through that way, I'll stop, pull over, and get a little video or picture of the scar in the tree. And yeah, it was a pretty gruesome accident. That was rolling the odometer the first time in the Bel Air, 100,000 miles. So I was hoping that the second turning the odometer would be uneventful, and it was. So that was kind of nice. I was hoping my dad would be around to do it with me, but unfortunately he had passed away before it had turned the second time. I was kind of hoping he'd live long enough to do that, but I guess life had some other avenues at that point. So anyway, that's I'm not gonna ramble on much longer. This video is gonna be too long. Probably most of you won't even watch the whole thing, so I'm gonna end it here. If you like the video, definitely hit the like button. If you like my channel, that 348 engine icon that pops up there will subscribe you, and thank you for watching my video.